Food addiction.
Okay, okay, go. You talk about, let's just talk.
Well, I was just thinking about what you typically talk about on, or some of what you talk about on what you're craving, relationship to food and addiction and the spirals we get in. And I literally was thinking, I was like, well, I talk about rest and I teach about rest. But then I was like, well, but what I also within that acknowledge is that we have a really distorted relationship, most of us, many of us, culturally, I'll say, to work, and like whether we're inserting the way we relate to food, our bodies, work, all these things. I'm like, well, I guess we could fill in the blank with many things and just realize that we have these distorted relationships with how we nourish and feed ourselves,
to say the least.
When I was like, I don't know, what are we gonna talk about?
Well, that's so funny. Just in the spirit of distortion, obviously we do so much research. And so I have all of these kind of like lead up questions to talk to you about. I was just reviewing them before we started. First of all, hello, welcome. I just pressed record because the pregame was so good. Octavia, welcome. And so I was just reading through these questions and they're all so basic. And I'm compelled to just get to can I just start with the hardest question and then we can roll back from there? That's like my love language anyway.
Yeah.
Because I agree with you. Listen, I think this addiction to busyness, I will put myself in the category with everybody else, is killing us. And certainly in the midst of our, fueling our addictions and our, not looking for the right thing. And I think when I think about people I treat, and I think even when I think about myself, I mean, I have to really sit myself down to meditate. When it's time to rest, I have to almost parent myself to put down the phone, to have it be an intentional practice. And I think a lot of people consider, especially people who are struggling with eating disorders, addictions, things like that the brain gets so noisy and it's so violent to rest. So what do you think about that?
No, as you were talking, I was like, oh, like, I don't say you should be still and rest, like flippantly, like, this is for kindergartners. You go do it now.
Easy peasy. What? What's wrong with you? Why can't you just rest?
I'm like, it is obviously easier to like be in the movement and do all the things and add one more thing to the list and be in that spiral, because if it wasn't, we wouldn't be doing it, right? And it's a practice, right? It's a practice that requires a sense of presence and awakeness, and it is not right. So I think about rest as a practice that actually awakens us to what's actually going on, right? And one example I use is let's just take slowing down, not even resting, which is kind of pausing, but let's take just slowing down. We slow down on your regular route to work, for those who like leave their house, and maybe you're always going the same cadence, the same pitch. You might not notice half or 75 or 80% of the things that you pass by every day that are fixed in place, right? And I'm speaking from experience. Like, I used to take the same route to work. I'm riding, but I'm just speeding along. Never notice anything. I just get from point A to point D, and I couldn't actually tell you anything that happened in between. I could just say, I got there. Maybe there were some stop signs or something, I don't know. But, one day I was like, you know what? I'm not, running late. I'm not trying to get somewhere that takes 20 minutes to get there in 10 minutes, right? And so I go a little bit slower, and I'm like, how long's that been? Oh, there's a little taqueria. Oh, look at that beautiful tree. I'm noticing all these things. And then I go, oh, I wonder, is that person always on that corner? Do they live on that corner? Like, I start to notice the beautiful and the not so beautiful. And so what I'm saying is that just that process of slowing down causes us to become aware of the landscape within and around us in a very different way. And rest is going to amplify that awareness. And if for any reason, I want to avoid that, oh, I'm not going to rest. My to-do list is just going to get longer and longer and longer. And so I teach restorative yoga. I teach Yoga Nidra. I teach just take a nap, right? I teach just walk a little bit slower. I teach strike through one thing on your to-do list without doing it. Like I teach that. And I don't really start with those long things.
I love
Sometimes
that.
it's
So you're like,
just,
it doesn't have to be a 20-minute sit.
oh no, because like if you run, rip and run, as my grandmother would say, which just means all zip, zip, zip back around. If you're going 100 miles per hour and someone goes, go to zero, that's like, what that feels like.
Yes.
What the experience is. That's also just like, I am not like a therapist. I am not, a psychologist. And what I can say is that's also not how the nervous system works. Going from 0 or 100 to 0 is a really jarring, right? And so what I teach is, when people come to me and they're like, but I am fatigued and I am tired, why can't I rest? And we don't start with, well, let's do a 90-minute restorative class. We start with some movement. Really, we start with like, well, let's just chat, So now we're here. Let's look around where we are. So we're getting physically comfortable. We're relating to each other. Okay, now let's notice our body. Now let's just do some movements. And now let's do some more movements. Okay, now let's roll, right? Let's connect to the body. And now let's start to slow down those movements. Okay, now do you want to try sitting still?
Yeah, it's sort of, I think about this idea of like, I think many of us, and when I was deep in my addiction, I knew this to be true. Like I knew I couldn't settle down because I was so scared to, but until we do, we don't, right? Like until we do, the fear is still there. And I love the title of this book. The book that it's coming out February 1st, 2022. Mark your calendars. Pause, rest, be Stillness Practices for Courage During Times of Change. Can you link for us how getting still helps with a practice of bravery and courage? Because let me tell you something, especially in January, February, in like the world of eating disorders is like so tricky, right? It's like when you've picked that fast diet and it's just starting to really abuse you and you're about to give up and you're about to get that like traumatic notch in your diet drama belt. Talk about a time that we need courage and to know ourselves and to take back our power and all of the things. So talk me through what these practices of rest and stillness, how do I link that?
So courage, the Latin root of core is heart. It's heart, and so one way I think about courage is tune into heart, listen to heart, act from heart. And I'm not talking about like the surface of that, the Hallmark heart. Can I say that?
Yeah,
right?
no,
like
right.
on like
not
the top,
Valentine's Day heart. Yes.
Not the cutout, the stencil, but beneath the skin, beneath the muscle, beneath the bone, like deep, deep within the heart. And so how do we access that, and what's the link between stillness? So first, I will say that it's a interesting loop because stillness requires courage, right? You already have to have a little courage to go, okay, I'm gonna pause or slow down.
Like maybe that's it. That's what happened for me. Maybe I need to just like, it was the scariest idea. I was like, maybe I need to get quiet. Uh-oh.
Yeah, like I think it's like courage is the seedling droppings, right? In this one way that guides you to the stillness, and sitting within yourself also cultivates and activates, amplifies, if you will, more of that, right? I feel like in stillness, we get to see a lot of who we actually are. But in that, we're going to go through some layers of like, well, that's what they told me I was. And that's what that teacher told me I was. And maybe my mama told me that. And maybe my daddy told me that. And maybe those friends are not so good friends told me, that all comes up too. And if you, even in like a 5-minute sit, just sitting and breathing, you might go through all of that. And if grace descends upon you, you might also have that moment where you go, but I'm this beating in my heart. Like I'm something else. I'm not who they called me, or even the labels that I've attached to myself, right? And so I think it
Well, I think
takes
that's a good
courage
one,
to
though.
come to.
Can we stick on that point? That's
Yeah.
can you unpick, like, I don't think we need a psychologist for this. I think we need a yoga teacher for this. Can you, I've been a therapist for 20 years, and the longer I do the work, the more I recognize that so much of it does not happen in the mind. Right. I just, I want to talk about this. I'm just having this remembrance of these two old guys in AA. They're called Joe and Charlie. And they talk about the 11th step in the 12 steps is a step about prayer and meditation, and I guess effectively stillness. And these two men are sitting and they're having like a conference, and they say, if you attended to your spirit the way you attend to your body, like you can find an hour to take a walk. You can find 45 minutes to get into that bar method class. Like you can do that. If you attended to your soul the way that you attend to your body, what a different life it would be. Right. So I wonder this idea of what you're talking about, which is being able, when we hit stillness, to be able to decipher the voice of who's talking. Can you get that elementary school, like kindergarten, like pre-K for me? Why sitting still may help me hate myself less?
I love that you say, who is talking, right? You go like, who is that? Where you sit, one of my teachers is Tracy Stanley. And I don't know where this teaching comes from, but she talks about this meditation practice where you essentially sit and the thoughts come up and you go, not this, not that, not this, not that. And that's not really, I've never done that practice in that kind of concreteness. It has spontaneously arisen from me, right? So when she's telling me, oh, this is actual practice, I'm like, I love that in my stillness. I've had this experience arise where I'm watching and I'm like, not this, not that. I'm not this, I'm not that, and then you do that enough and you go, you're going to get curious about, well, what part of me is able to discern that much?
Say more.
That I'm not this, I'm not that.
Like I'm not a terrible person. I'm not never getting well. And also I'm not queen of the universe. I mean, it might be sort of that middle path.
And I would say in yoga, we call it the witness, right? The witness, this witness consciousness. I also think about it as this deeper aspect of my being. And in the quiet, you get to start to hear that voice. I think one of Maya Angelou's last tweet. That is such a wild thing to say.
I mean, isn't it
coupled
wild?
With Maya Angelou, right?
Right. We're talking Maya Angelou. Her final tweet. Yes, I understand.
Her final tweet was, and what were the exact words, but something like, listen to yourself, and in that quiet too, you might hear the voice of God.
Gosh, can we say that again really slowly?
And I kind of want to look up and make sure I'm saying what she said, listen to yourself. And in that quietude, you might hear the voice of God. And so I want to be clear that we could sit here right now. We could say, let's do a 2 or 3 minute practice. We get still. The first thing that starts to happen is I feel like the little monsters come up and come out. Ooh, you didn't finish this. You need to go do this. Why didn't you do that?
Do they like it? Are they going to turn off the podcast because you guys decided to get silent? Are you okay? Are they ever, sure. All the stuff
that comes up. And then what gets really interesting, that can get interesting if we can watch it. Wow, look at that. Isn't that interesting? Wow. Mind is turning up. But then if you can go, well, mind is turning up, then what's watching all of that? That is who I meet in stillness, the one that can watch. I think of her like my great grandmother, Miss Evelyn.
Oh, I love Miss
She
Evelyn.
would,
I don't even know
Miss
her.
Evelyn would sit on a porch,
Porch sit. Oh, you have me.
porch sit and quilt and knit.
Hmm.
And I mean, a car could drive up the road with the loudest music. She just goes, isn't that interesting? Someone comes by, mowing the lawn. Isn't that interesting? Someone opens her mailbox and you're like, they're opening your mailbox. Well, isn't that interesting? Just a way.
I'm using that. Isn't that interesting?
Just
one of my teachers says, well, that's an opinion, Rob. I'll say, that's an opinion. Well, that's an opinion. It's so good. But it's really taking, I think we undersell the impact of our judgments, and when we are our judgments, right? When I am like, oh, wait, maybe I am a terrible person. Oh, wait, maybe everybody is going to leave. When it's undiscerned, if that's a word, I'm really in trouble. At least there's something we can do about all of this. I want to say that to anyone listening, because I think most of the people who are listening will say, well, good for you, but good for you guys. Good. That's great. Good job. I want to say personally, I'm very interested to hear about you. I would say personally, every time I have to go deeper into a practice of which we are talking about, it is completely preempted by pain. When I started transcendental meditation, it was because I was just out of my mind, off of my rocker. And I thought, I think the only answer is to really befriend this mind of mine. It's the only option available. It was the last house on the block and I didn't even want to live there. Right. And I was like going out of my mind. What in the world? How do you become a yoga? How do you become a Yoga Nidra teacher, specialist in can you let us know? Because I feel like we need a little real life here.
It's been a winding path that you said, pain brought you to your practice.
Pain deepens my practice even today.
Yeah. I'm gonna marinate on that. I'm gonna put it like back here, thinking about that.
Get back to me. Come on the show again. I'm obsessed with you. You're such an emotion. You're such a nervous system down regulator. Just sitting and looking and chatting with you. I already feel
interesting.
better.
I talked to someone the other day, and she said, "I feel calmer talking to you," and I was like, "What?" I'm like, well, that's interesting because I have a 5-year-old.
Does not agree. Well, I would say even the pace in which you talk, it's like, I want to match it. I'm thinking, wow, I need to chill out, be a little bit more like Octavia. So I would disagree with your 5-year-old, but my puppy would disagree that, it's all the same. So how did you get here?
So pain brought me to the yoga mat. The ending, probably 20 years ago. Really, the first class I took was in 1999 in a college classroom, in a college gym. But I didn't remember that for a long time. And so I thought, wow, the day I mark as my yoga anniversary is January 9th, 2003, I believe. And it was the end of so many things in my life and this relationship that clearly needed to end, because had it not, so much else would have not happened. But my early 20s pain within all of that was like, what do I do? And so I'm a Tori Amos fan. I don't know if anyone listens to Tori Amos.
Do you want to just hang out all day? Oh,
and
gosh,
there is a
play her music
from the 90s. I don't remember the title of the song, but she was like, I've shaved every place where you've been. And I'm listening to this song over and over in my like breakdown of a relationship. I've shaved every place where you've been. And I was like, well, I'm not gonna shave everything. But the sentiment of like, I have something to get out of my body or off of my body was there. That's what brought me to my first yoga class. Like, I have something I need to shave off my body. And not in terms of, it wasn't like pounds. It was like an energy. It was an experience that I was like, I don't know how to release this out of my body. And for whatever reason, I thought yoga could help me. So that's how I started yoga. And I'm saying that to say that I went to my first yoga class and then I went every day for like 60 days, right? Like my start, it wasn't like a start and stop.
It's just something inside of you said, go again, go again.
Yeah, because I was trying to save my own life,
Mm.
and um and so in this way, like a yoga is really a practice that is personified to me in
Mm.
that it is there. Like my genesis with yoga was like when I was like, the world is dark. It is dark. I don't know where to turn. What's my place in this world? Without this raggedy ass relationship, I'm no one, which was clearly not true. But I would go to yoga. Sometimes I wouldn't even fully do the practice. I might sit and cry, but it was like I'm there and I'm breathing. And I also had realized that I was very like not connected to my body, like almost not in my body,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I live because I'm still very cerebral, but I lived in my head a lot, all of that. So anyhow, I'm just setting that as the stage for like when I became a yoga student, I was like, I'm a yoga student. and this, so a fast forward a few years, and that's just kind of how I practice. I show up for my practice. I don't really take a single one for granted. And a few years later, I'm like, well, I want to learn more about yoga, or I'm doing a lot of asana. And I'm like, well, God, it
Mhm.
feels like there's
So just
more
for
to
those
this.
listening though, asana is like,
Asanas, the poses, is
right.
the um, what you can show people when you go,
Mm.
I do yoga, you can show them the
Right. It's
pose,
the
right?
warrior one of it all.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yoga is really subtle and it happens deep inside, and then it's reflected out in the way we engage with our communities. I'm like, that's the real yoga, right? Anyhow, and so I want to deepen my practice. So I engage in a teacher training a few years after becoming a student. And I also looked around most yoga rooms and I go, God, there's so many people not missing, right? A question I ask
Mm.
whenever I whether it's a virtual room, whether it's a podcast roster, whether it's an actual conference, whatever I'm looking at, I go, well, who's not here? No matter, right? I know people have their niche, right? Like you might be like, well, this is a conference about such and such and such in tech. And I'll go, well, within that, there has to be like a BIPOC person. There has to
Yeah,
be a queer person who's like within that sphere. So,
absolutely.
and so I have always, like my mom said, when I was a little girl, I'd be like, seeing who's not there, what's not there in the moment. And so part of my impetus for yoga training, even though I was like, I don't know if I'll be a teacher, it's just like there were so many identities that I match, right? Like my body's different,
Well,
just
not different, but
fuller,
maybe different in
different,
the yoga rooms.
rounder,
I mean, but that's like, but
more
I'm,
athletic too at the
mm-hmm.
time. And I'm Southern, I'm Black, all of these things. And I was like, I don't see that teacher in the room. How is that teacher not in the room? Why is that student not in the room? And I also just kind of believe when the leadership in the space or in a field starts to shift, the studentship or participation becomes more diverse, right?
Mm.
That just makes basic sense, right? And I know this from my own experience when people, whatever. So I become a yoga teacher. I do my training, become a yoga teacher. I access what I want, what I realize I'm looking for, which is, the yoga is more than what I can do with my body. So my training really connected me to the breath work of yoga. We call it pranayama to the meditation of yoga. I was introduced to transcendental meditation too. I love it. It's like a core aspect of my practice. And so I just think about it as going down a staircase. And so I do that training and I start teaching, and I'm teaching really athletic power, physical yoga, and I'm having fun. I'm like, connect to your core, all this stuff. And I start having this really distorted relationship with yoga and my body.
I'm so excited we're talking about this. Mm-hmm.
Really, I started being like, I'm chasing the handstand. I start with
Mm-hmm.
this very pure intention, right? And now I'm chasing the handstand. I loved arm balances. I'm chasing the performance in this one sense, but I wouldn't have admitted it, or I had a platitude to give you to be like, no, that's not what I'm doing. I am doing something else, but really look at this move, right? um, and so you asked about how I became a yoga nidra teacher. I told you it was a winding course. I'm
It's
getting
okay.
there, right? And so I am teaching all the hot power yoga. At this point, I'm also a public school teacher. I start doing, because I want to be able to do the flashy yoga poses and I want my body to look a certain way. And so I start doing CrossFit all the time. I'm talking about get up at 4:30, 5:30 a.m.
Exercise such an under spoken about addiction. This is my story too, by the way. I have a pitcher's injury. I have a pitcher's injury from yoga in my shoulder. I mean, I'm with you.
I'm telling you that I'm getting to the injury that brought me to, there has to be another way. So this was my life for this was 10 years ago. So I'm getting up, I go to CrossFit at 4:30 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning. I run back home, brush, do like my really fast flip around because I got to go to my day job, go work all day, go teach yoga in a hot room for maybe 2 to 3 hours, practice in that hot room afterwards so I can keep burning calories. This is so interesting because I was like, what am I going to talk about on this podcast? And I'm like, you have this. I don't know if exercise, this is a word, but this was what I was doing to myself. So then I get home maybe 10 o'clock at night. You can add up the hours that I've worked out in a day. Right? You can already add them up. I was never adding them up, right? Because I was like, and people would go, oh my God, you work out all the time. You look so great. And so like, it's reinforced. I'm like, yeah, and I'm probably only eating breakfast and lunch because then I don't, whatever. Anyhow, I'm in this cycle maybe for a year or two, hardcore like that. And I end up with this condition called rhabdomyolysis. Do you know this condition?
I do not.
And rhabdomyolysis, let's see if I can do justice to the explanation. It's something that sometimes ultramarathon runners get it to understand it's the perfect storm of your over usage of muscles, some level of dehydration. And just to break it all the way down, it's just like extreme overwork of the physical body. And what happens with it is, when you work out, you lift weights, part of how the muscles start to pop is because in the breakdown process, then your body repairs the muscle, right? And so when you have rhabdomyolysis, the breakdown of the muscles and tissue process starts to happen so rapidly that it overloads your kidney, and your kidney can become really toxic and kind of lock. And so I end up with this condition.
Wow.
From overworking out and dehydration and undernutrition, undernourishment. And I'm still a yoga teacher, and I'm still talking about mindfulness. And you see how unmindful, how disconnected I got again from my body, right?
I love a spiritual bypass conversation,
And so then I'm up in the hospital. I take myself to the hospital once. I Google, the Google doctor tells me that I might have rhabdomyolysis. And I don't recommend the Google doctor, but in this one instance, like it's such a rare thing. I don't know. So I go to the hospital. They're like, we don't see people your age. Like, there's no reason why you would have that. So they do all these other tests. And then finally they test the protein that you have to test to determine if you have this. And I don't know what the normal level is, but mine was up by thousands, right? And they're like, immediately admit me, blah, 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 blah. So I'm in this hospital room thinking about how I'm not going to be able to work out that day, and been like, when am I going to get out of here? Just, you see the distortion?
Totally. That was addiction. I mean, I love this story.
Totally.
This story's my love language.
And one day turns into 2 days, turns into 3 days. So and basically they're like, you need to rest and we need to hydrate you.
How did you feel when they said you had to rest right then and there?
I told you I was there thinking I have to go work out and I have to work. Right. And I felt like I had this overwhelming feeling because I was a public school teacher, and public school teachers are taxed and underworked and overpaid. And I was like, my colleagues are going to have to pick up the slack for me. I can't ask anyone to do that. And so I just started crying. And then one of my colleagues was like, hey, what's going on? Will you be in today? And I was almost about to lie to her. And then she was just like, I sent her this picture. I was like, I'm in the hospital. And she was like, whatever you need us to do, we got it.
Mm.
And then I cried from guilt and relief, right?
Mhm.
This kind of double fold. And so I felt afraid. Like I was like, what's going to happen if I'm not doing all the things? And then what's going to happen if I have to ask someone else to carry the weight of the day or my job for me? And then I was just like, I got workout goals and now I can't meet them because I'm in here. Like this is all these.
Sure. This is it. I mean, but right. I mean, it's sort of like when we're doing something that goes against our wisdom and we need more of it to get the same high. I mean, exercise, I really think exercise, work addiction and exercise addiction
It's real.
are so rewarded in our culture. It
Yes.
blows my mind. Also because I struggle with both. I always know, like when I'm in a gym and they give me I was just doing a program and they had an unlimited membership and I had to literally say to myself, we don't do that. We don't, the minute I get unlimited membership, I'm like, well, can I go tomorrow? Can I go the next day? Can I go later?
Or two times a day? Like all of that.
3 times a day.
Yeah. And so I'm laying in this hospital bed. The nurses are great. One nurse in particular comes in and she sits on my bed and I'm like, wow, that seems, why are you sitting on my bed? This seems really inappropriate. And she ultimately says, hey, why are you in here? And I'm like, hey, you have my chart. You know why I'm in here. And then she just gets really serious. She's like, no, really, what are you running from? Like, what are you trying to outrun? Because she's like, I read your chart. I did.
I have the chills all over my body.
Yeah.
So this little angel of a nurse walks into a room and says, what are you running from?
What are you trying to outrun? And
I think everybody should think about that right here. And I think we should maybe take a mindful pause for everybody to think about that. Who can't rest.
Like, yeah. And then she said, what are you trying to outwork? Right. All these things, and she's pretty much like, can someone else do it? And I'm just like, you don't know my life. And so then I start crying, right? And she said, listen, sweetheart. And she gave me this scripture. She said, do you know this scripture? Be still and know. Psalms 46:10, be still and know. She's like, it's not be still and check another email. It's not be still and go for another run. It's not she's like, it's saying that sometimes in the stillness, this is where the deep knowing comes from. Mm-hmm. And then she tells me all the commitments she has in her life. She's a grandmother, she's a nurse, like she's a dedicated member of her faith community, all these things. And she's like, once a week, I turn everything off. I tell everyone, don't call me, don't ask for anything. She told me about her rest practice, right? And then she just kind of patted my leg and said, like, you have got to learn how to be still. You've got to learn how to rest. You got to learn how to be all right with yourself as you are without doing all of this extra stuff. Because she was like, you're too young for this. She's like, I've seen this in like elderly people and ultra marathon runners. What are you doing? Right. And so that was like this turning point for me. And that was where I started to investigate. I was like, so you already know about meditation as a stillness-based yoga practice.
Well, you're a yoga teacher. When all
what about, I'm a yoga teacher, right? And so then I literally in the hospital bed, I start like reading more about restorative yoga. I knew about it, but I was like, that's the yoga where they use all those props.
I'd be like, I don't have time to do restorative.
Yeah, I'd be like, why do they use all those props? And then I and I had already been practicing yin yoga, but I was like, maybe I should take that more seriously. And then I also encountered yoga nidra. So I say all of that to say it was a literal physical, mental, emotional. I would also even call it spiritual breakdown from overwork, exhaustion, and addiction to exercise and under eating, right? Undernourishing myself that landed me in a hospital where as a yoga teacher of like all the super physical yoga, I go, I have to do something differently now. And it was, literally I'm like still on my computer and it's where I'm like, okay, so my yoga has to look different and feel different because I can't do this to myself.
It's like your life had to. It's like your yoga.
I'm in a hospital bed.
Yeah.
In the yoga. And the nurse told me,
And an angel walked in and asked me what I'm running from. Yeah. It's like, if we don't listen to those messages, we're really in trouble.
What are you I was like, oh, the next message will be so much louder. And so I didn't get, out of the hospital and immediately go and become a restorative and yoga nidra teacher. It was literally, I tiptoed my way into a class,
Mm.
and got in the back corner and pretty much cried through the whole, like, because stillness brings the stuff up.
What
The
do you
funny
say to
thing.
people who cry? What do you say to people who cry? I mean, I'm trained in a lot of Eastern stuff, and we always say,
Yeah.
comes up to come out. But I think that's
Yeah.
easier said than done when you're emotion phobic. Like, what do you say to people who are like, I'm going to literally explode if I go quiet? What do we say to them?
Yeah. I say we're not going to do 75 minutes of that, and I also say, if I am the teacher, okay.
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that what
And
your
we,
grandma says?
it's like,
Isn't that
and we
interesting?
can like watch it, and we can
Mhm.
like notice what bubbles up to the surface. And what I teach when I teach these long restorative classes is that, like, things will bubble up to the surface, right? You might just get sleepy and drop off to sleep, right? If you're really physically tired, your body's going to go, boop, I need to sleep now. But if we remain relatively awake and we are come into a resting state, you might have a moment of immense joy. You might start to feel sad. You might have a memory. I always tell people the only thing you have to do, like, if you can just be with that, if you're like, this is too much, move, get a drink of water, like you're not locked inside of any experience, right? If you feel the train of an emotion coming and you're like, I gotta get out of the way of this, I actually can't do this right now,
Mhm.
then going back into movement will shift that for you, right? So drink water, but also, can you notice it? And maybe next time you can go in one more second more, And so I really did want to answer your question. I told this long story, but it's like, then
Oh,
I
I
go,
think
I
the
had
best
to,
podcasts are the ones that don't answer any of the questions, in my
yeah.
opinion.
But so I become a student of rest and restorative yoga and yoga nidra, and then I become a teacher of it. My path completely turns, right? Like what I thought. Um, I was teaching like power yoga, connect to your core and your power. And here I kind of make this turn, and I'm still teaching that. But the methodology I use, how we tune in, how you connect, I'm like, well, what's the source of your power? Can we tune into that, right?
Mhm.
And so in this interesting way, like, I don't recommend anyone take that path to stillness that I took. I hope no one has a breakdown or lands in the hospital. I don't think that has to happen.
Well, right.
And, I don't judge where I started. I don't like, I'm grateful for those physical yoga practices, because you have to move. Like, movement can be medicine. And I think it's really important. I happen to have this really distorted relationship with it. and,
Mhm.
and it didn't happen. And something you said when I was in the middle of the story was the way we reward, like, my arms were chiseled. Like, if I put how people like to do before and after pictures, if I put my before picture of when I was just before I went into the hospital, when I could like fit into a size 0 and my back was all ripped and I had abs, that would be this before picture. My after picture, I'd have maybe little jiggly arms and my belly sticks out a little, but my face is brighter and I'm more connected to my
Yeah.
heart. And I'm not in this same kind of distorted relationship with how I'm not abusing my body with or punishing myself with movement. And so it's so interesting. Like, a part of me wants to do, people usually have a different before and after, like, well, look
I love
at this,
yours. You literally
you
have an
know.
aura around you. I mean, like I wish, well, maybe
Well,
we will
because
put this
people
on
don't
YouTube, but
know
like it's
some,
you just look so like a healthy person, just
well,
like a
thank
happy,
you.
healthy person. That's your outsides. I don't know your insides, but
Yeah,
I get a
but
vibe
like
on them.
culturally, the picture where I'm like all chiseled would be get all the golden coins and stars. And that is, to your point, how some of our deeply unhealthy and addictive behavior is the most rewarded. And we know that you get the little rewards, the dopamine shitter lights up. You go, how can I do more of that? I want that reward, even
Yeah.
if it's really unhealthy for you.
I'm always reminded, like, I think this is, I mean, if we're bastardizing Maya Angelou, then we'll bastardize Tara Brach. But, she says something like, if you hate where you live, why would you ever want to go home? And I always think
Mm,
about like a meditation practice or a mindfulness practice or a self-appreciation practice is like, we have no shot. If we can't sit with ourselves, why are we ever going to want to come home? Can you talk me through, which, I haven't read your book yet, which I cannot fluff and wait till Feb. But like how you link
Molly, I thought I sent you a copy.
No, but count me in on it.
Okay.
I love VIP and I love you. So it's really working for me today.
Okay.
Rest as a tool for courage and resilience. Help me connect them.
I love you keep coming back to this. This was like the same.
Well, I'm obsessed with it, obviously. It's a little personal too.
Ask your question again.
How do you link this restoration, resting, coming home to yourself as a tool? Sell it to me as a tool for being more courageous and more resilient, being able to bounce back when things feel hard, because things feel hard,
Okay, I got you. So I think we established this earlier in the conversation that you already have courage. A, if you're listening to this. And B, you have the moment you go, I'm going to sit still for a little bit. You already have courage, right? So I think A, it's important to acknowledge that you're bringing courage to a courageous moment, right? You're not without it. You might feel like I want more of it, but if you are endeavoring to
by just showing up, you are bringing courage to a courageous moment. Oh,
that's courageous.
That's a tweetable. So you can have it.
And so here's a truth. We've all been completely exhausted before. And in some meeting and trying to have a clear, coherent, and potent, or like trying to have the next great idea, or trying to just interact with the people in front of us and just be like, I'm fucking exhausted. Can I say that? I'm exhausted. And we've also had moments where we just plowed through and then we finish and we're like, that just kind of felt completely unproductive. Like we got through the hour, we got through the meeting, but what actually happened? Nothing really. And we're probably going to have the same meeting next week and rehash the same stuff because the mind space we all were in was kind of totally exhausted. And then some of us might have had an experience where we're like, you know what? I'm not going to just plow forward, or I'm going to go and take a break from this meeting. I'm going to go into the bathroom. I'm going to do something that shifts me out of that gear, the slightest pause, and then step back in and have more clarity, have more mojo. That, like, on the simplest level, we've all had experiences where we were kind of out of it. We took some version of a pause, whether it was like, I'm going to close my eyes for a minute. I'm going to shift gears. I'm going to do something slower. I'm going to go think about something else. I'm going to just walk around my desk. I'm going to stand up and sit back down. We've all had a moment of like interrupting the kind of cadence of how things are going and coming back to it and being like, okay, I can finish this now. I can face this now. And for me, I'm like, the practice of rest is really just the practice of there's a cadence happening that is exhausting and starting to feel stale and ineffective. What if I pause? Okay. Now, I don't think of rest even, Molly, as just, I'm looking over here because I have a rest station set up.
Wait, can you key me in on what's in it? What is in a rest station?
Well,
now I'm just
jealous. So part
of
it is like, my hack is that if I leave the setup there, then I don't have to get ready.
What's in it? What's in a rest setup? I mean, gosh, let me get my Amazon account open.
So I have about 6 blankets. I have these little fuzzy things. I have.
What do the fuzzy things do?
Make the landing softer.
Oh my gosh.
Right. Because this is my Yoga Nidra and my restorative setup. Right. And in Yoga Nidra, we talk about creating a rest. As far as I know, the only thing birds do, like you do in a nest, is rest. Right? And so, but you want it to be as comfortable as possible. So I have 2 blocks there. I have a couple bolsters, a few pillows, a poof that I got from West M that I thought I had other purposes for, but now it's like a poof that I stack bolsters against and lean back on.
But you find
Um,
comfort in that. That's where you find a
yeah,
comfortable space for your
yeah.
body. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. But so I was saying that like sometimes that's what, like I do that kind of rest every day because I teach it, right? And I also feel like it is disingenuous and out of integrity to be teaching things that
Right.
I don't actually practice, right?
You guys go
So
rest while I go run a marathon. Get back to you. Yeah, I
yeah.
get
And
it.
it's like
Right.
I might do both of those things
For
and
sure.
I'm gonna rest, right? And so that's just to say that I teach rest in this one way, but I also teach rest as the pause. You don't have to set up the whole nest and do all that. If you might want to, if we practice pausing enough, we'll move into the space where you might be like, now teach me what a nest is. Show me how to do that. I want to lay
Well, I
down
love
in a
that,
nest.
right? Well, that's like your
Yeah.
yoga story, right? You took a lot of classes
Yeah.
and you said, I want to be professional. I think about
Yeah.
in DBT, the kind of therapy that I'm trained in, when they talk about like using skills, which effectively are more mind, but like interrupting your moment and being able to tolerate discomfort by interrupting moments. I mean, this is the journaling of
Yeah.
it, the bubble bath of it, honestly, the putting
Yeah.
ice on the back of your neck of it. But they say this thing that kind of reminds me of what we're talking about, where it's like you learn to swim, you swim, and then you learn, and then you can swim in the riptide. And it sounds like that's what you're talking about with like a rest or quieting down process, which is do a minute. It come courageously to a minute. Maybe you'll come courageously to 2 minutes. Maybe you'll come courageously to making a nest for yourself. But
Yeah.
I'm sold. I mean, I was sold before we started, but I'm like super sold on
I want to add one scaffold to that.
do it.
Before we come courageously to a minute, can we come courageously to the space in between a breath? That's it. Like if you inhale, there's a pause, exhale. Okay, you pause for the day. Now go on. Can you do that when you wake up? Maybe today you do it once. Because
I cry over that, you know,
I
because
mean,
we're so, I mean, it's so part of the workaholism, right? Like, well, I can do 6 minutes. Okay. You know, you're like, how about today? Just notice a breath in between.
but Molly, that is my like the pain that it took me to be still. Like meaning like I have so much compassion for people who overdo and overwork and are like, I just can't do that. And so for me, I go, and so I also know it's kind of counterintuitive. That person who overworks, they're like, no, give me the 90-minute practice.
Right. No, I do with people too. People say, I want
And
to
then they itch the whole time or they play with
right.
their hair. And I'm like,
Yeah.
just please start with the breath.
Well, that's our homework.
And that space in between, just notice the space between inhale and exhale. You don't have to make it longer or shorter, noticing that it's there. And then do that for a minute. And then
That's
do it
our
for 2
homework,
minutes.
everybody. That's our homework. I think also, I mean, our homework is to practice that. I think we can all commit to that. And then I'm not going to buy your book because I'm getting my VIP copy,
yes.
but I highly recommend because it sounds like there's a lot more goodies in the book. You're lovely. I have so many ideas about things I want to hang out with you about. And I'm so grateful for you coming on our show today.
Thank you for having me.
So
I love this connection and
me too.
That like little story of exercising my way into the hospital is, I'm sure there's someone who's like, I can relate to that.
Oh, also the person who's interviewing you. But, you know, I love this idea that, you know, from our greatest pain points come our greatest thriving. And I mean, what you've done for others as a function of that pain point is also the story for me, right? Because every time I'm in a pain point, I hope this can help somebody one day. Every time I'm in a pain point.
I am
That's
grateful it can be of service, right? Like I'm grateful that there's a way for that to be offered back out and hopefully serve the world.
Well, it sounds like you're doing that. And that's certainly you did for us today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.